So, welcome to Make It Happen Monday. For those that don't know me, I'm Cheryl Andrews, also known as the Listening Detective, and this is a show where we talk about how you make it happen and what works for you. And today, I've got a guest with me, none other than the Dr. Caitlin Walker, who is my mentor and trainer, and the person who absolutely transformed my life. And also, I'm very grateful to say a colleague, and we are going to be launching a program in January. So I thought I'd invite her on to help to tell you a little bit more about what we're going to be making happen. So, hi, Caitlin.
Hi, Cheryl.
So, is there anything else you want people to know about you other than that?
Um, well, I think just that I've got a really deep interest in loads of aspects of human existence. So, I guess, my majority of my business is in sort of conflict resolution and organizational change, but I like to work a lot with teenagers and support them to find out what they're like and how they can make things happen. So, yeah, I kind of have a broad range. And the thing that we're doing together is a little aspect of it that it's really, really nice to kind of go, well, this is something I'm interested in. Actually, let's make something interesting happen out of it.
So, tell us about that thing that we are making happen.
Well, it started over the last couple of years. It's been growing. I nursed a couple of my relatives who were terminally ill. And one of the things that I noticed while I was looking after them was that they had incredibly different attitudes to death. So, one of them, my dad, when he found out that he had terminal cancer, he said, well, I've had my 70 year and 10. Every single thing that happens from now on is a bonus. And he didn't look forward to death, but he talked openly about it. He was we had really deep, lovely conversations. And much as I didn't want him to die, it was an incredible experience being with him through that time. And the other was my stepdad, who was terrified of death, who was frightened to die, who was angry that he was going to die, who was resentful um, about who was there, who was visiting him, who wasn't visiting him, and really struggled to talk about it. And it, because of the differences, and I looked after them both, and I looked after them both with a lot of care. It was very difficult when somebody was upset and resentful about what was an inevitable death. It was very difficult to then put their what they wanted into place. And I felt afterwards, I thought, you know, I really didn't take the right care of him, but I couldn't get there. And I thought, goodness, I hope my children um, know what I would like for my death. So that's how it worked. Is that I started to think, what do I think about death? I don't. I haven't thought about it much. What would I like to have happen? What wouldn't I like to have happen? And I thought I had a birth plan. Maybe I'd like to have a death plan.
And so, what is it that will be happening in January? I'll just pop a little bit of the name of it. We've got it's living with the end in mind. But so,
Yeah.
what is this about?
Well, what we've done, what you and I have done, what we've done is we've interviewed people about death for you is like what, and from that we've started to go, what are some themes that generally people seem to think it's going to be useful or interesting to talk about. And then I thought, okay, well, we'll put together, we've got the themes, I've done some focus groups, we've done some interviews. Let's create a program where a small group of us can get together and go, what is death? Thinking about own death. Death for us is like what? An ideal death for us would be like what? What do we want to have happen? What don't we want to have happen? Is there anything that we really need to do? Any conversations we'd like to have beforehand? And I know you and I, even just the research process, I've learned loads. I'm I'm energized. I feel inspired. I mean, how's it been for you?
I think there's been mixed. I think there's the initial bit where the relationships that I've got with people who I feel can have those open conversations.
Mhm.
I've gone up to them and said, "Is there anything you need me to know, or is anything you want to know? If this were my last month on the planet, and this was it, So we've had those kinds of conversations. The other big thing was when I thought about my death, I knew I wanted it to be in that bed with the sun coming down, and I wanted it to be at a certain time of the year. I even had the day and the time of day I'd like it all booked for. And so it was been really interesting because we've been like thinking about moving or whatever. And I said to Mark, well, that's the decision made because I now know. And I've known that, and I've caught myself thinking that before, but I hadn't known it like that. So it's just taken a decision that we've been like, shall we move, shall we not? That's off the table. So that's like cleared a massive space.
Yes.
And it has created some conversations with people that I'd like to make them sort things out, and like, oh, could I use my death as a way of getting them to get it sorted? Do you know? It's like, I'm dying. Could you two just be nice to each other, please? And it's like, so and I haven't done anything with that yet, apart from thinking, actually, have I done as much as if I were to die today, can I honestly say that my relationship with that person, I've done as much as I can. And actually, our conversation we had actually about after one of the things is like, I realised I was feeling responsible for them getting on rather than the relationship I had. So it's more about the group dynamic.
Yeah.
And I've had to grieve that it's that the dynamic is not how I'd like it to be. And I think a lot of that comes back to when my mum died, our family scattered. Because we lost the matriarchal that was pulling us together, and it was not a together. Even the funeral was what a couple of people wanted and what a couple of people needed. We didn't know what she wanted, so it was just get through it. So I sort of see it from both sides. I can see how not having that. So I feel really comfortable that my two children and at least that generation down, I can have done what I can do. The ones at the same level as me or above, I'm kind of like, do I want those conversations? And
yeah, even if you had those conversations, you can have them, but you probably don't have the same jurisdiction. Like you can't. It's a shared understanding, rather than let's all get to a common understanding. It's like, I know what you want, you know what I want, but it doesn't mean that we're going to agree. Yeah.
I don't think they don't even want to have that conversation. They just don't want to talk about it. Because I think we had that conversation where you said some people don't want to talk about it because if you don't talk about it, it won't happen. And some people, if you talk about it, you'll make it happen. It's kind of like this, and I think that's with this subject. But I think with lots of things in life, if you've got that abundance mindset where whatever you talk about, you'll attract. It's like if I start talking about death, I might get it. But it's like, so I think there is that. So I've noticed a few binds with the subject.
There are, and yes, and accepting it. That maybe if you accept it, then you've given up the fight. Yes, and I noticed a lot of those things, and there are consequences. So, as I said with my stepdad, it was very difficult to get him to talk about it, and one of the things I absolutely knew is he wanted to see all of his children before he died. But because he didn't want to talk about it and he didn't want to talk about it with them, it was, if it had been my dad did want to see all of his three children. And it was one of the reasons my sister, my brother and I spent a lot of time and effort making sure that we could get along and that we were good together, that we were strong, because that's what he wanted to see before he died. Whereas for my stepdad, if he'd said, right, this is what I want to see all my kids, then we'd have gone, right, today is, getting all your kids together, and this is what your dad wants, and let's organize it, and here's how we can do it safely within COVID, and I'll organize it. But there was the not actually really wanting to have that conversation or to acknowledge that this might be the last time. Then he never got it, and all of his children tried to see him just before he died, and no one got to see him, and it broke my heart because I knew that that's what he really wanted, but because he wouldn't have the conversation, it was hard. But yeah, I'm with you. It's not necessarily that these are going to be easy conversations or fun conversations. And I haven't found so far that it's always been more healing and more useful and more inspiring than it hasn't felt morbid. It hasn't felt.
No, I think there's acceptance was a good word that came up for me, was that actually, without knowing it, because I hadn't talked about it, I hadn't thought about it, I'd obviously been unconsciously percolating, I wish I could do this, and when's the deadline, and what can I do to sort things out, and who's responsible. And actually, once I gave it some thought and thought, actually, I'm going to let it go, when I modelled my death for me, there was this real sense of peace. I thought, God, I want to live like that. I don't want to wait to that moment when I stop
Yeah.
breathing that I feel some peace. I want that peace in my life now. And it's like, and the metaphor was this sort of letting go. And I thought, I'm going to let go of worrying about my whole family. You know, if they want to come and see me, they know the door's open. I've put enough breadcrumbs and cake invites, and, you know, I've sent them enough messages. They must, I'm assuming, they know. So it's like there was a real relief of accepting that which I cannot change, or, and I own the fact I'm not ready to have a conversation that could mean that we really have separated. Whereas at the moment we're just kind of pretending we've got a relationship, but it feels like we're separated. Whereas if I tried to have the conversation, then we
Yeah,
might be separated, and it might not go as well as I'd like it to. And so I think that's the hard bit about these things is I think there's a part of I don't want to ask for it because I might definitely not be able to have it, and then it's easier just knowing it's because I haven't asked yet than actually I've definitely been denied it.
that's that's the thing. I guess there must be lots of families like that. Sort of, let's just keep it in stasis rather than addressing it. So, do you have a sense of what? That's at least three choices. One is you have the conversation, you take what you get. You don't have the conversation, you keep it in stasis. You choose to never have the conversation and keep it in stasis. Like, it's not just it's in stasis, and I'm never going to have it. Do you have a sense of what you'd really like to have happen?
It's almost like I don't need to have the conversation. I need to show it with more love. And actually, what I need to do is heal the anger that I've got for not being included in the death as well as I'd like to have been. So I think, I can just feel that now. It's actually the reason I'm not ready to have the conversations. I can handle the rejection or them not liking stuff, but I'm more likely to get those kind of conflicting conversations if I'm coming from a place of anger and contempt. So I've got to get rid of my stuff.
When you say get rid of, I do really encourage, as I know you do, is to go, anger is often overlaying hurt and sadness and grief. And so, and that's the other thing I know that we want to have from having these conversations together and having these conversations in a group is to go, what are we grieving for now, or not allowing ourselves to grieve for now? That actually it'd be really good if we could, even if we can't resolve a relationship, we can resolve our relationship with ourselves. So yeah, I think that one of the things I think that's going to happen, as is happening with you and with me, is we're going to find little spots of grief and anger and hurt or disconnect that we'd really like to get resolved, and maybe put a plan in and go, okay, but before I die, I am going to resolve my relationship with this.
Yeah. I can definitely sense that. And there's the logical brain, and I have had some of these conversations when I sort of said, oh, why didn't you do this? Or to check with my dad. The interview. The basic essence of it was, I was with my mum in the afternoon. She was meant to be going to the hospice that next morning, and she went at just after 11 that night. And I was so cross that nobody had called me to be there for that moment. But in my dad's mind, as soon as she was doped up on morphine, she'd gone. So he didn't. So that's where the miscommunicate. But when I got there, he said, "Go and say goodbye," and I didn't know what to do. She was. It sounds horrible, but to me, I thought she's going to be cold. She's going to be hard, and I didn't want to touch her. And I felt like I was being watched to see how I say goodbye, and it was all very. And I think that to have those kind of conversations with my children, and just say, even if you really want to be there, and even if I want you to really be there, you might not be there, and let's say whatever we've got to say now, because we don't know when we're going to go or how we're going to go. And I was very grateful and very lucky that I had that lovely afternoon with my mum. But what I'm only really realising as I'm telling you now is it wasn't a shared family grief. I felt very on my own. I think there's some value when you can come to these peer groups, because you can't perhaps do that with your family, but you can have that shared grief. You don't have to try and do it on your own. It's quite hard to let it go. That's where I feel I've got to do. But I have to remember, by the way, that I am facilitating this session, so I'm hoping that I'm not going to end up in floods of tears or grieving with the participants, and that we might do it in private. I don't know.
But I think that that's part of what we're going to put in a safe space together for, is we'll make space for both of those those sets of things, and there'll be things that will really touch us in other people's stories, things that resonate with us. And I really feel that there's something in death. If you're not connected in the way that you'd really like to be connected, it's difficult to just let that person go. And because you need the network to hold you, or a network. And I think, I do think that that's I worked really, really hard, as I said, to create that so that we could be together. I know my daughter, in fact, we were just here. You can probably see the piano. My dad died here, and my daughter was playing the piano for him. It was one of the few things you could just see. He would just smooth his brow, and every now and then he wasn't speaking anymore, but he'd go, lovely, lovely. And you think, oh yeah. But she went off to have a shower, and he died while she was in the shower, having been there in vigil for a couple of days. And she came down, she said, oh, for goodness sake, she said, Grandpa always said I wasted water and took too long in the shower. He would do that. He'd slip off while I was in the shower just to make a point. The truth of it is, he would have done, if he could have, he would have done that just to make a point.
Yeah. And I think that's the gift of clean language, systemic modeling, all the things, the tools that we use, is that we create this space where we can have these conversations and more or less just, to get to know yourself, really, what you want and what you need. Because if you're going to have a difficult or challenging conversation, it really has to start with clarity of what you want and what's happening in yourself. Otherwise, you just, well, in my case, erupt over everybody else. It's just a bit of a messy splodge, really.
Yes, I know. And even when you've got those tools, it doesn't mean we don't,
Oh, no. My husband will let you know I'm not. Yeah. I do know when I'm being paid and when I've got to control it, and then when I don't hold it in so well later on. So given all that, I'm just going to pop down here the actual, if I get it right, I'm going to put that there. That's the link if you want to book, if you want to find out more about it. What would you like to have happen, Caitlin?
In terms of
the course, or program, whatever we're calling them.
And I know this might sound terribly selfish. I'm looking for some really, really beautiful connection with other human beings. I'm looking for some of what we've had already, where we go, oh, I've just realised that. It's never occurred to me. Or one of my interviewees, she said, I've been so terrified of death, and she said, I realise it's because when my mum died, I was torn apart. And she said, but that was for specific reasons. And now that I understand that, she said, I'm going to go and talk to my girls and make sure that they are prepared. And moments of inspiration, one of the people I interviewed, she said, when I was 13, she said, I suddenly realised that death was going to happen. And I said to my mum, I can't bear it. She said, I love you so much, and you're going to die, and I can't bear it. And she said, my mum said to me, you are going to be all right. And I'll tell you how I know for sure. She said, I love my mum. She was my sun and my stars. And she died, and I made it through life, and I'm okay. And when I die, you'll be okay too. And I was like, oh my goodness.
I know, it's just in my heart.
And it was just, it was lovely. I thought, there was just things we say and things we don't say, and beliefs we have and beliefs we don't have. So sorry, I get caught up in it, but the human contact, and also the diversity of contacts. We've already had people who believe in reincarnation. We've had people who believe that they go to nothingness, people who believe that they go back into a universal consciousness, that they go to God. So there are lots of different. So the other thing is to find a space where we can hold space to have those conversations and go, this is what it's like to be in this person, this culture, this is what it's like to be in this one, so that we really grow richer from knowing each other better.
Yeah, Absolutely. So, without any further ado, as we're coming up to about the 20-minute mark, if you're interested, what a great subject is. This sounds just before Christmas, just very interested in talking about death, and like to be able to, in my words, set yourself up for success and find out a little bit more about yourself and others, then please do check out the link and join Caitlin and I in January.
Or, see now, Cheryl, it's a Christmas card gift.
It
For all the family. There we go. Sort it out. What have you gift giving for you? Send them all a little invite. Bring
Would you like to come along to the party? What are you trying to say? What are you inferring? And on that note, there's a really great example, isn't it, of when is the right time, who do you ask, and when do you do it? And I think if we try to time it any time, it would always be, there'll be something to say, don't do it. But if you know it's been on your mind, and you know that maybe, like we've just said, maybe your past experience of death wasn't great, but you'd like to change that pattern or change that in your family, please get in touch. Thanks for joining us today, Caitlin.
Thanks, Cheryl.
So in traditional Make It Happen Monday, I'm going to finish with our 3 questions. So given what you've heard today, just take a moment now and think about, what would you like to have happen? And then take a moment, once you've got your answer written down. Of course, the great thing about video, you can pause it if you want to. And think about, how do you need to be for that to happen? And lastly, what kind of resource or support might you need for you to be like that and for that to happen? And if you are struggling to find the right resource and support, please get in touch. Take care, have a great week, and I'll see you next Monday.